Who's the Cubby pitcher that's like he hasn't had an earned run the entire season so far? I saw yesterday.
Really?
I think so. Something flashed through the baseball news on my phone and was like, hey, I don't know if anyone's paying attention, but he hasn't given up an earned run this entire season. It's like, wow.
That's crazy. They've had a little bit of a patch it together pitching staff, but everybody that they've brought up are just like, pitching lights out, and they've just got Imanaga back, so that's huge. So
is this baseball season? Are we talking? Is it baseball?
Yep.
Okay.
Tis.
Okay. Or as I call it, pre-football season.
Yeah.
Sports ball.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
We have here in our midst the personification of the Chicago Cubs. The futility, the futility
and the wonder.
There it is.
Dr. Timothy Gombis is with us today. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Voxology podcast with a rolling start. We're delighted you're with us. I, 3 minutes ago, was asleep, and so I have very sleepy eyes. So it was awesome.
I'll be asleep in 3 minutes.
And Tim, in 3 minutes, will be asleep. Perfect. Dr. G, before we get to you, I want you to know that you are in the presence of another Tim that is experiencing greatness.
Did you know?
Let's hear it.
I don't know if you knew this. Yeah. So Stafford, just give us the last 24 hours of your life.
Whoa.
All right. Just give the audience a glimpse. Because they say he's an English professor. He's a great question asker. He's handsome. But what else does he do? And then
what else does
boom.
he do?
Yep.
Well, last night my punk band played our first show.
Nice.
There it is.
And
the name of the band is
Broods, but spelt like dudes, Brudes.
Nice.
You can follow us on Instagram with the other 5 people that currently do.
Oh, that's huge.
Broods.
That is punk.
Fun.
That's punk.
It was.
Dude, any more than 10 followers and you're mainstream,
you sell out.
bro.
Exactly.
So well done.
So we gotta keep it simple. But
Tim,
yeah, that was last night, and
hold on. We're not zipping by this.
all right.
Give us a glimpse of the venue, Tim Stafford.
So the show is one of my ex-students from Jessup, a previous student, ex-military guy, fun kid, good guy. And he a little older than my other students because of the fact that he had already served for a while before he decided to go to school. So he wants to put on like a mini festival thing with just local artists. It's like he has started a guitar repair shop out of his garage. And
Nice.
So we did it out of the garage into the driveway and street or whatever. And
there it is.
Turned out to be a lot of my students, which I
was
not was not on my radar for some reason. So that was entertaining. But
a lot of his Christian students, a lot of his Christian school.
A lot of the students from the university I teach at. Yeah.
True
a lot
or
of
false?
jazz and
one
folk.
One of the songs had to be cut.
We cut a couple
potential
songs.
Sensitivity reasons.
And I also did some old Eddie Vedder on TV censoring where a word comes up and you just go like, while you're
nice.
Nice.
Did you guys do covers or was it any original music?
Oh, no.
It's all original. I mean, we covered, so we have a really fun cover of Bullet the Blue Sky that we've been doing, but that's one of the songs that we scrapped. And then we cover an old Stone Temple Pilots song, an old Faith No More song.
Ooh, what's the Faith No More song? I used to love
We Care a Lot.
Yeah. Okay.
It's fun.
That's awesome.
Good times.
So then, punk rock, though he is, goes to bed. He gets up bright and early. And then what do you do this morning, Timothy? We're recording on Sunday, by the way. Yes. As we debrief. I know that was amazing. We debrief the Broods concert. But then this morning, where do you go? And I don't even know how this went.
Well, I just got back from this. So, and I think some of the folks might be listening. There's a church very similar to Vox OC, a volunteer-run community of folks that, I've had a hard time finding a like focused community, or I don't know how you want to word it, but folks that have taken it upon themselves to build a community with no one on staff, volunteer led. And I know a few of them, and they asked me to come in and talk about some of the stuff that we've been doing and stuff with our Auburn Wellness Committee, how to get involved, what is the posture we hold in this time period? What's active things we can be doing, that kind of stuff. So we just got done doing almost like an hour and a half kind of Q&A, just having a conversation. So it was great. Wonderful people, ask great questions, like hearts in a really great spot of just, what can we do? What can we do? So it was good. It was a really wonderful conversation. Good folks.
So top that, Gombis. What have you done the last 24 hours?
Cannot do it.
You're not teaching, although that will happen soon enough. I mean, you're not teaching elementary students. I'm sure you're
not
still
this
teaching.
summer. Yeah, that's right. No, I just drove home in the last 24 hours. Drove home from Springfield, Ohio. Got up, did a long walk, and went to church and hung out. So that's about it. No punk bands.
Yeah.
No punk shows. Yeah. Can't top it. That's awesome. Yeah. Have you guys do any any classic punk like Sex Pistols or the Ramones?
None of that yet so far. I've been doing some Ramones in between. Like there's a song where our guitar player has to tune to a different tuning, and so I've got a couple of like a Ramones song, an old Husker Du song, a Clash song, songs that I can just kind of whip out and play.
That's awesome.
Like on the spot. A Fugazi song. Yeah,
that's so
good stuff.
great.
Oh, we cover Operation Ivy. That's a pre-Rancid old punk band. One of my favorite bands. So we cover one of their songs.
That's so cool.
It's very fun.
Gombis,
it's really a lot of energy.
It's unfortunate that that there would be any felt contradiction between punk and like a Christian audience.
Oh, don't even get me started.
Because like a third of the Old Testament is punk, and all the prophets, this is all they do. And I mean, this is Elijah, troubler of Israel, and this is John the Revelator. We got the Bible finishes with a punk book.
Yeah.
The third,
it's such a good name.
The second gospel is a punk book, and I think Romans is punk. Galatians is pretty punk. But for a domesticated middle class conservative white culture that calls itself Christian, I can understand that punk would seem contradictory to it.
I wish I would buy this book if I thought you guys would read it, but I don't think you will because it's a graphic novel. But it's a graphic novel memoir of this guy who is a person of color who grew up in how punk gave him a community and identity in the 80s out in like Death Valley, and it is so good. Wow. But you'll read it and you're like, there's so much gospel element in what punk advocates for, and in what it builds in communities and who's invited, and there's a lot to play with in there. That's pretty fun.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, that's
and you're never too old to be punk, Mike.
You can shut your face, bro.
There's some punk.
I've been punk before you were even alive. I was listening to Def Leppard.
Oh man,
see that
Duran. So good. Awesome. Total punk, man.
Yeah.
Gombis. Shut up. Just catch us up. Catch us up. How are you doing? What's happening? How's your life?
I'm great.
How's your summer? How's Louisville?
Yeah, things are fantastic. I'm fine.
Great catch up.
Yeah.
Really good.
Since about the end of May, I sort of squeezed in all my travel for into like a 5-week period. So I've been traveling a lot. And some great trips with friends. Was in Virginia Beach for a week with some.
Did you get an invite? Did you get an invite on that, Stafford? I must have lost mine. I didn't.
Yeah, I barely got one.
Okay, go ahead.
and
that's fair.
Yeah, I just showed up, and they, out of pity. And then I went out, got together with my kids in Seattle for about 5 days, and that was just an absolute delight. And so yeah, I've been.
Are all your kids up there?
No, my daughter flew up from Phoenix. My middle child Jake drove down from Bellingham, and we met near where my youngest kid lives in Green Lake, and just hung out, took walks, took hikes, and clambered around the seaside. It was just a lot of fun, really good time.
I love Washington.
Oh yeah,
it's a beautiful state.
It was a delight. Really had a blast. And so yeah, for the next 4 weeks I'm not going anywhere, and so just I've got to prep two fall classes I'm teaching over the next 5 weeks before elementary schools start back up again. Then I'll be back in there for another adventure.
What are the classes? What are the classes?
A repeat of Ephesians. So just some tweaking on that, and then
there's no prepping. There's no prepping there. You can do that right now.
I need to put together a course on Romans for them, for Fuller, which is that'll be a lot of fun to just put that together.
You're writing a commentary on Romans.
Yeah, so we're getting back into that. Yeah, getting the mind back in that, and so reading a bunch of stuff on Romans and.
Do you have any textbooks? Any textbooks that you're gonna assign? Like in mind? Do you have those in mind already? Is what I'm wondering.
I'm doing Beverly Gaventa's "When in Romans."
Perfect.
Which,
I
mean, she's.
Yep.
Yeah.
Say it.
Probably
Tim.
my favorite New Testament scholar when it comes to Galatians and Romans. I mean, she just is. She's the best writer of any New Testament scholar. There's a couple that are actually good writers, and she's a beautiful writer. And but I love her take on things because she's sort of from that apocalyptic school, but also like super judicious in all her interpretive choices. I mean, she's just sensible. Which
So the book's called "When in Romans."
She's got a short book called "When in Romans." It's really short, and it's just like 4 short lectures that she did that kind of capture like 4 major interpretive sort of impulses that run through the letter that are just in a way that's so understandable. So that's good. I'm using I'm using 2 commentaries, Beverly Gaventa and then also Michael Gorman.
He just came out with one, right?
Just recently.
Was that on Romans or was 1 Corinthians?
1 Corinthians just came out. Romans came out about 3 years ago, and so I was going to use Frank Matera's commentary, but I was like, Gorman and Gaventa, like,
he's ugly.
That?
Yeah.
Alliteration.
I think I'm using Scott
and
McKnight's book.
Gorman, Gaventa, and Gombis.
I'm using McKnight's book, Reading Romans Backwards. That'll be nice. And then I think I'm using Greeb's book, The Story of Romans. Sorry, I can't see that far.
Nice.
Yeah, so
solid.
I selected my textbooks, and I need to put them back in the shelf so they don't cast such a big shadow on my desk here, making me look like I've got work to do. And yeah, they're sitting on top of a book. Here's a punk move. I just saw this book at the bookstore the other day, so I picked it up, and I'm going to start reading it. It's called Pushback. The subtitle, the 2500-year fight to thwart women by restricting abortion.
Oh, interesting.
I think that'll be fun. I'm really looking forward to getting into that because I think there's a whole lot there to wrestle with. So yeah, this summer will be Romans, reading about abortion, and then I also bought Nate Bargatze's book, Big Dumb Eyes. So I'm trying to cover like the gamut of like paying attention to my discipline, learning about history, and just laughing.
Perfect.
For my mental health.
Perfect. I love that. Do you know Leanne Morgan? Do you know who she is?
I don't think so.
Southern comedian S. Is that what you said? Comedian?
Or just comedian?
Yeah. She's She's outstanding.
Oh, cool.
We were at anyway, she's in the lane. She's in Nate's lane.
Cool.
And
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah, real Southern drawl.
Southern drawl, in her 50s, totally
she's
makes
great.
Yeah, she is. We were at a camp in Alabama last week, and she came and performed for free for the camp. And it just turns out to be the nicest, kindest person in the history of the world, and just does over an hour long set.
Oh, that's so cool.
Just because she believes in the mission of the camp.
That's so cool.
It's so cool when they are who you think they are.
Yeah.
So, right?
Yeah, seriously.
Similar to how I felt about you. So I need to update. Not that you guys have asked me any questions at all, but I'm just going to volunteer.
Go for it. What's new?
I want to talk about this camp. This camp I was at last week was in Alabama. It's called Hope Heals, and it's a camp for individuals, either adult or children, and their families who are experiencing disability. And there are, I don't know how many campers, maybe 60 or so, and they are supported. They go free to this camp, and then there are about 120 volunteers of all ages who pay for the privilege of volunteering, and part of what they pay goes for the cost, like covering the cost of the campers.
The folks that are working at the camp pay to go.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes,
brilliant.
And you want to talk punk rock? Yeah. So the organization was founded by a husband and wife team. The wife had a stroke and has had other neurological issues since. And so they started this camp because they thought, okay, well, there are all of these hostile spaces to people experiencing disabilities. What if we created a space that was really friendly? I mean, no duh, but what if we did summer camp in the most accessible way possible? And I have to tell you, gentlemen, it was, I really don't have the words, and I may start sobbing if I talk about it too much, because it was one of the most profound spiritual weeks of my entire life. And I was telling Stafford, I think I was born again, because it's one of those thin places where heaven and earth overlap in tangible ways. I mean, Jesus would tell this story. The kingdom of heaven is like a single mom who has a daughter with severe cerebral palsy, among other diagnoses, who upon arriving at a camp finds over 150 or so people with signs, balloons, streamers, bubbles, loud music, lined up in a grove line or tree lined road, cheering and shouting welcome to her to her child. She had been abandoned by her husband when they found out the diagnosis of the children. She's not able to work full time because it's a full time job to take care of her child. This is the one break she gets, and the sobbing on her face when she's driving down very slowly through this row. It's about an eighth of a mile row of people. I just don't know anything like it. I've just never seen the outworking of belovedness so tangibly present. It was, I was there to kind of pastor the volunteers. There's also a pastor to the campers. And I mean, it's the values they have. Like one of the values is that they have a value that for beauty that dignifies, because so many of these families operate in utilitarian spaces at hospitals and therapeutic environments, and they're just all ugly. They just have this huge value that beauty communicates value. And I mean, it's unbelievable. There was a whole team of people whose job it was to do personal care. It was a personal care team, and their job was to change diapers and wipe and do all the G-tube things for adults experiencing disability so that the families could go and not be pulled out of their camp experience. I mean,
that's really cool. So thoughtful. Is this the first time that you've been?
Yes, Seth and Justy Bear have been there 2 times before. This was my first time there, and I was just an absolute mess. I mean, I don't have non-cliched words to describe what it was like to hold Roxy who I don't know what her diagnosis was, but her body was curved in upon herself. And she weighed maybe 120, 130 pounds, and it's all just dead weight. And her CC, the woman assigned to take care of her all week, was around that same weight. And so they were in the pool, and this woman was trying to help Roxy, but they're just the size. She wasn't big enough to help Roxy sort of get up out of the water. And so I just kind of came over and I don't have many gifts. One of them is large. So I showed up with large and was able to pick up Roxy, and I started kind of bobbing her up and down in the water and spinning just real gently. And her whole body arced. And the squeal of joy and delight that was let out. It was like, I've just never been a part of anything like it. Like I'm literally, I've got nothing. I don't know. I just felt like, okay, I have to change everything, and I don't know what that means. It was one of the most remarkable weeks ever. And if Jesus were telling parables about what the kingdom of God is like, they do a thing that's called a Luke 14 banquet. So if you remember in Luke 14, the invited guests of Jesus are too busy. They have other priorities. And so the master tells the servant to go into the lanes and the alleyways and to compel the poor and the lame and the blind. And compel doesn't mean coerce. It means make them believe that they're welcome. And so we have this banquet where the people who are there serving and the people who are being served. One of the core values of this place is mutuality of ministry. We need each other. And so the Luke 14 banquet is where we eat as equals around tables of blessing, and then we anoint each other. And so to have been anointed by people experiencing disabilities, like, come on, man. I mean, mess. And then you go out for a big dance party. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it's, let me just read one more thing. I'm so sorry. I thought I was going to make it through. And then Gombis got crying looking. and then I lost it. He said, so there's a talent show. So imagine Seth Erie and Nate Erie. Times.
Please tell me they rapped.
Oh, of course they did. Of course they did. They were going to do Syndrome Down, Money Up, their original rap. And I said, I don't know that everyone's going to appreciate that. So maybe they were like, what about disability to get disbread? I was like, nope, let's not do that. So we did.
These are real songs, Gombis.
Yeah, that Nate and Seth have written. But there was this 28-year-old. Again, I have no idea, but he was wheelchair bound. And I have no idea. You know, they have this incredible language. They call it person first language. I want to do a series on this because it was just some of the best theology of disability ever. So you never name the disability first. You always name the person first who has or who experiences a disability.
Yeah.
And so there was a young man who was 28 and had been, I think, at camp the year before. And he'd written his talent was he just wrote a letter talking about his experience. And the line he said was, I've never been liked for who I am outside of my family before. Mm-hmm. And it's like, dude, I just went, okay, there it is. That's everything. That's Ephesians, that's Galatians, that's Romans, that's Mark. I mean, that is the beloved community. It was so devastating to my heart. I just couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep there. Like my body my soul was too small to receive what was happening. And so I would just toss and turn for hours, even though I was exhausted. It was amazing. And then on top of all that, the way we got here was from Nate Bargatze, who is an amazing sort of really clean comedian. And this other woman, Leanne Morgan, just showed up and did this whole set for us.
So cool.
It was so cool, guys. And I for all of the cynics And for all of the disillusioned among us, for all of those who've been really hurt and who've just seriously given up on kingdom things, I dare you to go and spend a week there and then not come away going, okay, well, it's real. It's real. I don't know how to bring that out from that place into my normal space.
Yeah.
But I have not experienced God in any way, shape, or form like that. It just was amazing.
That's really cool. It seems to me that there's such a massive way in which, like, truly the layers and the levels of complexity in which, like, polite middle class white or upper middle class white culture has been constructed and delivered to us, and there's not a bad person to point to that did it. It's a reality, and we, three of us, and not everybody is in it, but like when we're, for the most part, evangelical Christianity has been constructed within that frame, and to participate in it is to participate in levels of politeness that you don't even know you're participating in, and there are things you don't say, there are things you do say, there are things you do talk about, don't talk about, and there's a whole way that you have this kind of massive cover over your own heart and life. You armor up internally because you don't want to be exposed as flawed. You politely pass judgment on other people. You acknowledge the judgment that the culture passes on people. And then when you're in an environment where all of that is off the table because nobody can afford to have it. You can't afford it.
Nope.
And it's been taken away for everybody. It's funny because the polite middle class white culture says, oh, those poor unfortunate souls. But when you inhabit a culture like that, you realize that it is freedom. Right. It's actually liberation. Yes. It's actually goodness. And you realize you don't have to armor up internally. You don't have to have any kind of levels of self-protection. And then you can you're sort of released to inhabit the fullness of your humanity because you're seeing the full humanity of other people. And it's not like you're doing good to other people. Like you're overpowered with goodness. It's like it's like a tsunami of enrichment and dignity. And I think that that's the lie that I have, that I know sort of kind of hovers around our culture, is that yes, those people need Jesus. We need to get out there and do. We need to help. We need. It's like that's such a distortion of how the New Testament thinks. Where it's like, to whom should we do good, Lord? It's like, well, when those people do good to you, they won't lose their reward. And it's like, well, wait, you just did a reversal there, because he's pointing to what you said about like the mutuality of ministry, which is so important to keep in mind when working with the poor or those people with disabilities.
Yep.
And it's like there are ways of stepping into our humanity, and when you experience them, because they are so counterintuitive to how our culture has been wired, it's so surprising, and the surprise just catches you. Man, it's so great to hear, Mike. What a delight.
Yeah. A tsunami of goodness. No one was trying to be good. It just because there was no, I mean, and as I had the most privileged seat because I got to be one of the welcomers in that parade for an hour and 45 minutes. And then I got in the car with Seth and I got to be one of the welcomed. And it was so much harder to be the welcomed. I was struck. I just kept saying thank you to everybody. I was struck by how hard it was to receive it. And so I lived in this middle ground because I'm with parents who they don't have what I have. They don't have a community that welcomes Seth every weekend to close with the Shema, and they delight in him. I'm like, we're in rarefied air to find community like that. And so this was, just torrents of anger and rage and sadness and disappointment. I mean, they just have been holding it in and holding it together under that polite banner. It was, and no one cared. I mean, just the kids, we were throwing fits and throwing things and throwing up, and no one. I mean, it was just like, well, of course, that's what we do.
Totally. This is what sounds like. This is what the kingdom sounds like.
This is what the kingdom sounds like.
Totally.
Yes. Oh,
this morning, one of the things they asked me about was working. They took stuff off the bios that we have written on our website, which I didn't write. I think our mutual friend wrote. And so he's like, what, you've had experience in bars and prisons and something else. Like, what have you learned spiritually, or what has formed you in those settings? But it's a very similar conversation, because you have something like that in the prison where you're really forced to wrestle with human dignity and what do you actually believe about the redemption? Are all people capable and worthy of redemption? And all that kind of stuff. Like, the prison forced me to reconcile everything that I had been given and taught about folks, and then be faced with it and be like, no, okay, this is what we're really going to talk about, dignifying the humanity in everybody. And we're going to talk about what opportunity looks like. We're talking about all these different things. Like, it's just, so it's interesting. Then obviously, we were talking about stuff with immigration that's going on. So yeah, a lot of it, but it is interesting because it's like I don't know. Yeah. Fascinating stuff.
Well, all of it. I mean, we'll just need more time I've not seen a more developed theology of disability in terms of its practical outworkings in anything I've read in 16 years since we had Seth. It's
we got to post that picture too.
I don't know how to. I don't know how to use Instagram at all. So all these pictures floating around, but I don't know how to put it on.
There's a great picture of Seth, like, kind of leaning out the passenger. You see Mike driving. Seth's leaning out the window, and just his face is just pure joy, so cool. Like just pure joy. It's a good one.
Yeah, you just and then you. I mean, it's exactly what we're saying in the delighting and the humanizing of everyone else. I get delighted in and humanized. I mean, it's just. I mean, I just can't explain. It felt like my soul was vibrating when I would try to go to sleep. I just couldn't do it. Like, it was. I don't know. I don't know, but thank you.
Like,
thank you guys for listening and receiving.
That's what
that.
Tyler Durden says in Fight Club. He had a near-life experience. I love that line.
Yes, that's a great line.
It's the best because according to the rules of our culture, it's like we know where life is. Life is in all the predictable places where there's like more prestige, more power, more accolades, or whatever. But like, life is stepping into recognizing, seeing the dignity of others fully, especially those whom our culture strips away their dignity from. And then when we step into those those spaces and relationships, we're humanized, and we realize that we're living fully alive then. And the difference in how that shows up in our bodies is that we're actually sort of like walking dead people, the rest of the time when we're playing by the rules of politeness, which is really has a kind of horror to it.
Yeah,
I was thinking about this morning at the whole last shall be first and the first shall be last, and how I've always heard that verse spoken about, and then people wrestling with how to embody it. But I was thinking about it this morning in lieu of when you put yourselves into positions with those that have been labeled as last.
Yep.
Experiencing exactly what you're saying and seeing what the first aspect of that is as it's tied into their positioning or whatever it was very provoking this morning.
Dude, I had a near life experience. That's such a great way. And it was so overwhelming that
Is that the title of this episode?
Yes.
There you go.
I love it.
Professor
It was so overpowering. I came home, I slept 6 hours. I was up for maybe 6 hours. I slept 5 hours in a nap. Usually that's an overnight sleep. 5 hours, then I was up 2 hours, then I slept another 10.
Wow.
I mean, like it was just
wow.
My soul, my soul couldn't handle it, man. Anyway, thank you, brothers. I was eager to
cool.
talk about this because
what a great experience.
You know how
That's awesome.
I don't know how to pronounce his name. Paul Ricoeur. Ricoeur talks about that second naivete. There's some of the things I'm reading. I don't know if you guys see this, but so the first naivete is when you like encounter a piece of literature and you just sort of absorb it for what it is. And then there's a kind of a deconstruction where you ask questions of it, you pick it apart. And I'm oversimplifying here. And then when you go through that, there's kind of a second naivete when you approach the text again through all of the questions. And I feel like that's happening in some circles with Christianity. In other words, like there are some who are moving through the cynicism and the deconstruction into the second and joyful place of like re-engagement of the kingdom. But it's in those kinds of spaces that it's most felt and appropriate. You know what I mean? It's just an interesting thing where, particularly around, like, I just talked to so many younger, like high school, college age people who are just tired of seeing what's wrong, and they want to be shown instances where it's working, where things are actually happening. And it's, I don't know, it was just amazing.
Is that the age of the volunteers? Are they that
there were
young?
Some that young, for sure. Then you had, it was, I mean, you could not, if you were to take a dot chart and plot, or a graph and plot like the age range and the spiritual range, and that, it would just be a scattered, I mean, it would just be crazy. It's all over the place.
It's really interesting that you say that. I remember, just because I grew up in the evangelical church, which is so segmented. We are all demographied. I mean, it's like, you are K through second. These will be your interests. This is what you like. This is what will entertain you.
Yep.
Oh, now you're third through fifth. So that now, and you like, and I remember one of the first times I encountered at my really huge church, the deaf group. And I remember someone explaining to me, the deaf community runs across, and they were almost saying this from the perspective of a demographied. This is just kind of the norm is split up by your demographics, so that the experience of church is segmented according to age group.
Yeah,
and they were talking to me about this because it was like they find each other, and their experience is so particular to them that they share a common language and they share a common way of seeing, and when they do stuff together, it runs across age groups and where they live and all that kind of stuff. And it was like, that's outside the norm. Okay, well, I guess that's just, but it's like, I mean, that's a more accurate picture of what you find in the church, where it's like people from all kinds of backgrounds and locations and social settings are brought together and made into new family, and given to each other.
That's what it was.
That's really
that
cool.
was it. That was it. And the reason I brought up the sort of second innocence or second naivete was, you should have heard this community worship. Tim Stafford and I have all sorts of thoughts about worship music and what that is and what that does. But there was something so pure there about you. You've just spent your whole day holding stories of real hardship and struggle and difficulty. No, there's no explanation. There's no easy answer. I mean, I did 5 talks. One of them was on sitting Shiva. One of them was on lament. One of them was on who was born blind, this man or his parents. It's a theology of suffering. And then at the end of the day, they would all gather. So it's at 9. They've been going since 8 in the morning. And at 9 we would gather, and the explosive nature of that worship was so healing for me, because it was through the pit. It wasn't around it. It wasn't in place of it. It wasn't a dopamine rush. It was just a genuine, like, I can't help but shout something right now. And it was like I just sat there and was healed. It was like, oh my goodness, man. Oh my goodness, there's so much there. Because what they say, they're not a church, so they say they're church adjacent. And I kept saying, no, the church really needs to be Hope Heals adjacent. You know what I mean? Because this is it. And I've never spoken to a mixed audience from anywhere from 6 years old to somebody in their 70s who paid more attention and was less rowdy. I mean, the kids were perfect. They just sat there and listened. And the number of kids that would come up and say, I really love what you were talking about. I mean, it's just, I don't know. You just didn't have, I don't know. I don't have words. Okay.
But that makes sense for how did you describe it? Like the space where like the veil has grown thin, or thin place, or how you worded it. But that resonates with what you're saying.
Yeah. It was just, so things like worship, preaching, Bible, all of that had such power there because of the context. You know what I mean? Like sitting on a Sunday morning in a nice suburban community, singing about God's goodness is one thing. But in a mixed community with families who just their hearts have been ripped out because of tragedy, and they're singing about the goodness of God, I mean, that's just a whole different, you're just like, there's a whole different thing there, So I felt like I went back to seminary. I just really felt like I went back to Bible college, seminary. Totally. So my goodness, I don't even know where to go after this. We got Tim Gombis. If you want to talk more about this, we can. I'm all in. We could make this the whole episode.
Well, I was talking with my good friend Don over this last weekend. I was up in Ohio just hanging out with friends, and we took a lot of morning walks together. And he's in preparation for ministry in the Lutheran Church. And we came from similar backgrounds. It was just interesting to talk very similarly about how comfortable he has felt in the Lutheran Church, how comfortable I have felt in the Episcopal Church, because of the actual coming from an evangelical background. I always looked at the Episcopal Church as sort of like milquetoasty and lacking conviction and just bland. What they just
they're the main line, quote unquote,
and especially with various stances that they've not taken and that sort of thing. But then to have stepped into the logic of the Episcopal Church and to see the beauty of the refusal to quote unquote take a stand or to draw lines or to sort of rule on who's in and who's out, and just talking, sort of taking off on what you were talking about with regard to sort of that second naivete and like sort of a recovery of, I think, a Bible-oriented simplicity. I mean, Tom Wright said this years ago about how so much of like evangelical doctrine demands way more specificity than can be found in the New Testament. So people end up getting into all these fights over the wording of things where you can't find. You just have such problems finding text in Scripture to support what you're saying, and I found it so difficult personally when I was within evangelical spaces to operate, because I saw reading Scripture and engaging with Scripture and listening to Scripture, I saw all that as a positive exploratory project of like, what new things are we going to learn, and what fresh ways can we grapple with contemporary problems, and like how can we be reconfigured in some new and creative ways if we listen more attentively. And so for me, that was like a project of exploration. It wasn't a project of definition, so that I'm trying to find out lines and I'm trying to find out who do I exclude and that sort of thing. And so for me, being in the Episcopal Church and just having a more general but very strong adherence to historic Christianity, and from there, that generous posture of exploration is possible. And so simplicity of just recognizing that we're a people that are claimed by God in Christ and given life by the Spirit and given to each other as gifts and receiving the church as a gift, and being given to God as a gift, and sort of like taking steps into the world to explore how to extend that generosity to one another and to the world is an approach to being Christian that is satisfying to my soul, is intellectually satisfying because it resonates with the approach of the apostles, and their discussions, and it satisfies my understanding of Scripture. But it's also deeply satisfying, and it opens me up to receiving all other humans as gifts, and to sort of doing my work, and I have work to do, to posture myself to others as a gift to them, and to sort of like find out what gifts I have to bring out into community. And that kind of simplicity seems to me, it's so compelling. I'll just say that. To me, just coming out of these conversations over this last weekend, we both have found such liberation into sort of understanding our Christian vocation as a positive exploration of how to do good in the world, and using the language of Scripture to map that onto our own communities, and to map that onto our action in the world. Like, this is what we're doing, and this is how we make sense of how we're acting in the world, with regard to immigrants in local settings, with regard to the poor that are sleeping on our doorsteps of both of our churches. And this is the set of language we use to talk about that. And that's, I just, it's funny to me because in my the institutions I was at formerly, I loved being at the seminary at which I formerly taught, but when I was teaching undergrads in a sort of a more contested environment at Cedarville University, it was like we spent so much time spinning our wheels in arguments about doctrine and fine-tuning statements. And I remember just thinking, like, when do we ever get around to doing the stuff that Jesus talks about all the time? It was interesting enough, that community just never quite got around to it. When people did get around to it, that, there were others that took offense. But anyway, that kind of simplicity, or that second naivete,
that's it.
That has a simplified, that has a wizened and wise view of what matters and what doesn't. To me is profoundly satisfying, and to me profoundly compelling, and I'm seeing the beauty of it at this point in some fresh new ways. Anyway,
that's it, man. I love that. No, that's so good. I'm reminded that in the Hebrew Scriptures, people recited what God was like by recounting what He had done, and so there weren't creeds. It was just our ancestors were wandering Arameans. Like there's that whole thing where you would go into that sort of, or rehearsing the Passover or whatever. Like, very, very rarely do I sit and talk about what kind of Jesus you believe in. Well, attributes. There was a time when Jesus, it's there, and then you're parsing, and then you're, that's it, man. You've removed Jesus from his concrete actions in the world, so my faith gets removed from the concrete actions in the world. And in a place of such belovedness, like, people were there from all sorts of. I even asked, like, what sort of denominations? Because I was going to lead us in communion, and it's like, no one cares at that point. No one cares. Nobody cares about whether you read the words or don't read the words, or nobody cares. Nobody cares. What about anointing the sick? No one prays for healing there, because they distinguish between being healed physically and being healed in more important ways. So, I mean, it's just the table is so beautifully set that there's no, like, the giving and the receiving is so simultaneous that you're not even aware. You're just not even aware. Like that moment with Roxy in a pool. Her parents, I'm sure, were grateful that she was taken care of and they could have a Sabbath. And Roxy seemed delighted in that moment. But like it's like somebody what's the image in one of the Chronicles of Narnia of the dragon kind of ripping away the false skin? You know, like I'm the one exposed in that sort of moment. And I know all the cliches. I know everybody who's like, Mike, you have a kid with Down syndrome. Again, I almost said a Down syndrome kid, which again is diagnosis first, no people first. You have a child with Down syndrome, and there's almost a pity or whatever there, and it's like no. You don't understand what Seth Erie does in the world. Like he's a bearer of the kingdom, and everyone will get that intellectually and emotionally agree. Yeah. But to see it, man, to see the guides of the kingdom lined up in a dance party, with a tunnel of us hooping and hollering as they roll through or get carried through or limp through. Man, I'm glad I got nothing.
No, it's really cool. It's really interesting to see if you reset the table away from individualism, where you're not calculating who were the givers, who were the receivers, and if you just saw it as one big soup of gift, it was like everybody.
That's what it was.
All gift.
Yep.
It was all gift, and like the people that gave were gifted, people that received were gifted. It's just like a mass of people stepping into gift, and that I think that's one of the biggest things. I think, unfortunately, we've our people, I'll just say it, have lost sight of, is that when you step into gift, there's no such thing as a zero-sum game. There's so much more. There's so much more there, and I think that those are what the feeding miracles are all about. It's like we are trained in our lives, in our world, to see scarcity, and then it's like so that you can't so that you look at immigrants and see takers, or you look at the poor and see takers.
That's right.
Because that's a worldly way of seeing things, whereas what the New Testament writers are wanting us to see is that there's so much here. There's so much here. And when we step into that arena of gift, there's like this massive explosion of super mega plenty that you can't, there's more, so that you end up spending a week doing that. And you can't even begin the process of processing what you experience, because it doesn't play by the rules of how you've been trained.
That's right.
And
totally.
Unfortunately, the sources that foster our imaginations in this world train us away from that. Which is, I think, what, the church is. That's our task, is to train our own imaginations, but to help form imaginations that see super mega plenty everywhere in our world, and to step into those modes of conduct and patterns of behavior to activate that reality.
Yeah. Right. But when so much of our Christianity directly opposes those modes of life and behavior and relating, I mean, it's
hard.
That's the trick. That's the trick.
It is difficult, but I mean, that's why I was thinking the other day, the kind of Christianity that I inherited, I know certainly in white conservative evangelicalism, it's not it, and I'm saying this based on historical study going back the last 120, 145 years or so. It's not a form of Christianity that's tainted by capitalism, like competitive capitalism, whereby when somebody else wins, I lose. So the zero-sum game and individuals in competition and the fostering of resentments. It's not a form of Christianity that's tainted by capitalism. It's the product of capitalism. And it really is. I mean, going back, Kristen Dumais talks about this in her book, well, and in some other articles about evangelicalism.
Say more about that.
It was the construct. So she talks about evangelicalism as a consumer demographic. And it's not like a slander. That's not a slanderous claim or like an attack. But really, historically, it was put together by, I don't want to say megachurch because that's sort of anachronistic, but super large churches like in Chicago, LA, Minneapolis, Dallas, Boston, New York City, these large figures in the late 1800s, early 1900s began sharing their mailing lists of their magazines and ministry publications in order to just sort of increase, to kind of help everybody out and increase sales and all that kind of stuff. And those are the networks. All those figures would have been highly loyal to their own denominations. But they began forming this kind of Christianity that would go to summer Bible conferences or, participating in other kind of Christian joint ventures across denominational lines. And there was this new kind of Christianity that was forming that ministry publishers could sell to because it was mailing lists. And it's a thing that came to be called evangelicalism. And in these growing networks, they were all white major, leaders of churches and denominational leaders, and black denominational leaders asked, to join and to become part of these networks, and they were denied. They said, emerging evangelical leaders said, "Go form your own thing." So there was sort of white supremacy baked into it. And whereas previously, and there are scholars that just take this simply from the enrollment numbers of places like Gordon College, and which was predominantly female, I believe, student body in the early 1900s, and oftentimes evangelical organizational leaders were women. That was reversed when this sort of growing trend began. So today, when we ask why is evangelicalism so white and why is it so patriarchal, it's because it was baked in from the beginning in the early 20th century. But just to say, it was created as a marketing demographic that ministry leaders could, build their subscriptions to their ministry publications, so that Christian publishers, which kind of arose in the 20s, 30s, 40s, so that they could get access to those mailing lists and sell products to, and then Sunday school publishers could sell their products to. And there was this thing that was just basically created over time called evangelicals. And I know it's common for us to look back and imagine that there was a pure time when there was evangelical theology and it kind of went off the rails and became more market driven. The odd thing about this is that when this culture started, becoming identifiable, decades after that, actually, and George Marsden began his career in the 70s, kind of studying this culture and writing books about it. Then evangelical theologians began the process in the 60s, 70s, and 80s of trying to nail down, what is evangelical theology? And there was never an answer. That's when you had all these battles between dispensationalists and covenantalists, which is this is the stuff of seminary nerds in the 80s. It's
I was there.
There was just never any kind of set evangelical theology. There were books written called "What is Evangelical Theology?" or collections of essays. They're trying to figure it out because it was created first as a marketing demographic and never really became a theological entity. And now that it's kind of returned to being a marketing demographic, I think there are a lot of people, a lot of folks tell themselves the story that it used to be something solid and serious, but it's you haven't done the work. You haven't read the histories. So anyway.
Oh, yeah. Whatever. Somehow we've gobbled up an entire hour just on this. This is we didn't even get to our question. So Gombis,
I'll just say the thing that's unfortunate is that as part of the marketing effort, we've been told that there's a certain kind of way of being evangelical church that is acceptable, and that is the creation of this kind of polite, tidied up, orderly. You have a successful family, and so single people, divorced people, families with kids who have disabilities. It's they don't fit the created demographic. and they don't fit the consumer niche, and so like they're an exception. Whereas like from the perspective of the New Testament, those are the folks that are essential.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, all right, that's enough.
Yeah, no. Well, the church growth principle. I mean, that's what we learned.
Yeah, exactly.
In late 90s, you attract like attracts like.
Yeah, find your demographic, that's the reason find your sales pitch, build that baby.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so
the problem is they're changing a lot of those narratives now, though. Like I was talking to one of the people after church today, and he asked me if I had read, I think it was called The Black Bonhoeffer, and it was like a book about Bonhoeffer, the effect the Black church had on him and his ministry. And I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. So he started talking about the movie that just came out and how they kind of were changing pieces of his history to make it kind of more whatever that fits into this market that you're talking about, or whether it was the Calvary Chapel movie where they wouldn't talk about Lonnie's sexuality and like different things. There's all these movies and narrative scripts are coming out and people are eating them up, but they're changing even those aspects of, quote unquote, evangelical history to even more fit. So now they're altering. I mean, it's not new, but we're seeing it on like big commercial stages right now of just a complete like edited version of things to help people feel more comfortable or feel more whatever and where they're sitting. And
like domesticating these historical figures. Yeah, Bonhoeffer spent significant time in Harlem when he came to the States.
Yeah, that's why I guess the book is about that. Yeah, and then kind of the effect that it had on his ministry going forward. It was fun. I was going to bring some books to recommend to the folks, but they actually like wheeled in a cart. One of my buddies that goes to this church went to seminary, and so he's like, I just have all these books and they're just taking up space on my shelf. So he just brought a cart in with all the books, and so people can just take a book. But while I was sitting there, I was going to be like, well, I think one of the best things you guys can do right now, any of us can do, is just read and be informed and learn. And I talked about the conversation that the three of us had about when I asked you guys about how do you listen to the Holy Spirit, or how do you discern the Holy Spirit? And Gombis, you talked about listening to Black women. And I was just like, we're just trying to read and empathize and understand and be more informed on all this stuff. And then I was just like, and there's a book right there. You could read this book right here. You could read this book right here. That were already sitting on the cart. So it's kind of wonderful.
I love that. I love that.
We need more. We need more informed folks.
Well, that brings it back to punk rock. It's not mainstream isn't going to do it.
Nope.
So Broods for Life is what
for Life.
That's our
what a blast. That's awesome.
Tim Gombis, I want to get to this question. Can we do another episode with you like sometime later this month and go over this incredible question about the table?
Yeah, I've got nothing on the schedule
dynamics
for
of
July.
The table. That's what I'm talking about. That is what I'm talking about.
Except Wimbledon this week.
Romans.
Oh, and the British Open next week. So Steve and I are going to be watching some sports, other than that, I got just chilling. Let's do it. That'd be fun.
Oh, I love it so much. You guys, thanks for being such great conversation partners. And to our dear listeners, you too, man, thank you so much for all of this. If you're not tuned in, the Reverend Gombis is podcasting again, going through Ephesians. And so his work on Ephesians, I just did an Ephesians series for about a year, about 9 months. And the Reverend Gombis' work is outstanding. He is the Beverly Gaventa to Ephesians as Beverly is to Romans. So
stick with the G's.
Hope no one hears that.
Gorman, Gombis, Gaventa. And scene.
Thank you for listening to this conversation. The Voxology podcast is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is made possible by listeners just like you. If you'd like to partner with us, you can do so at patreon.com/Voxology podcast or on Tithely, tithe.ly, and just search Voxology podcast. Links for both are in the show notes and on our website. You can interact with the hosts on Facebook /Voxology podcast or on Instagram at Voxology Podcast, and on Twitter or X, whatever it is, at Mike Erie. Thank you for walking this long road with us.